Mishneh Berurah comments on individual pieces were boiled. There is, if one puts the bread in the first utensil while it was standing on the fire, or in any rate when it was when it contents still had a temperature of Yatzavedas ball, so hot that the hand recoils on touching. So basically, here is it's very interesting. That's exactly what we learn on Monday. You see how it's all interconnected. So that's definition of cooking. So the definition of cooking, we're talking about kli rishon, the first vessel. The first vessel, the definition, as we said on Monday, is a vessel, is a pot, let's say, that was on fire or in the black, but in this case on the fire. Here it's not about Shabbos. It's we try to establish what is a proper blessing before and after to make of this bread. So it's bread. Is it still bread? Considered bread, or it's left the category of bread and became something else? That's the question. So one more time, this Mishneh Berurah. There is if one puts the bread in first. So commentary says that the first utensil is a utensil which the food or liquid liquid it contains was cooked or cooking on fire, right? Meaning on direct fire, I guess. The second utensil is a utensil so it's which received the food or liquid from the first utensil. So as we were talking about, we discussed how to make coffee on Shabbos. So it's this tea urn is going, not urn, this water urn would be your primary utensil, or tea kettle, or whatever is the pot in which you boil water is a primary utensil, and your cup would be secondary utensil, right? So even in secondary, it has, as we said, we said that there is if it's above Yatzavedas ball, it has potential to cook. Okay, so one more time, since we have all this introduction, one more time the sentence. There is, if one puts the bread in the first utensil, meaning as we just explained, while it was standing on fire, at any rate when it contents still had the temperature of Yatzavedas ball, so hot that the hand recoils on touch. So basically, it doesn't matter it's on fire or it's not on fire, it's going to cook, right? Because it's above Yatzavedas ball. However, if one puts food in a second utensil with a steaming hot content, this is not classed as cooking food, and the bits of bread which were put in a second utensil will therefore have the same ruling as the bits in the second case discussed in this paragraph. Okay, so let's try to understand before we continue what Mishneh Berurah is saying, that if we put the bread in the first utensil, right, meaning that was on a fire or was taken from the fire, right? So it's a kli rishon. So if the food, the liquid, let's say, the liquid in this kli rishon is above Yatzavedas ball, so it's going to be considered cooking. But if we transfer from that vessel to a secondary vessel, so so Mishneh Berurah is saying, so just so we know for our next Monday class, so Mishneh Berurah is saying that it cannot cook basically. So with a steaming hot content. So he said steaming hot, right? And so this is not classed as cooking the food. Okay. So it's 100%. It's very, very hot, but sits in a second utensil is not considered to be cooked. So that's what this author of that book, he took into consideration this ruling of Mishneh Berurah. But we're trying to go by most stringent opinion, and we say that basically it's still going to cook in a second utensil if the temperature, of course, is above Yatzavedas ball. Okay, so though we don't have the confusion, Mishneh Berurah say opposite opinion. right? That food is not going to cook in, not going to be cooked in a second vessel, even if the temperature is above Yatzel Adasbo. And the ruling of this bread is as a second case where we discussed on the previous page. We said like bread was broken on small pieces and then joined together while it's dry, right? While it's not boiled. Okay. So one more time, 1 second. And the bits of bread they put in the second utensil will therefore have the same ruling as the bits in the second case discussed in this paragraph. That is, if they were have the appearance of bread, one must make the blessing Hamotzi over them, even if they are smaller than the olive, right? So because we have to understand, it's, I mean, most of the time they would look like bread. What happened? I just broke a piece of bread, slice of bread on several pieces. They should look like bread, and it just because we connected these pieces maybe to give it different shape with a honey or with broth does not. I guess in most of the cases it's going to still look like bread. So even if it's less than kizayis, since it's what dry, not cooked, so we say that we say hamotzi, this blessing, even if they're smaller than olive size. Okay, why? Because they still look like bread. Okay, continue. This only applies if water in the second utensil did not become white because of the bread. Okay, but if the water did become white, as often happens when the bread is soaked in hot water, it is stated in paragraph 11 that in a view of this, bread will not be considered to have appearance of the bread. So very interesting, very interesting. So we added more details to the case. Okay. So the next detail is, right, the next detail is that even though it is second utensil, and according to Mishneh Berurah, they say it's not going to be considered cooking if you put these pieces of bread second utensil, on one hand. On another hand, if the water is going to change the color to white, that's it. It's going to be considered cooking. And forget about what we said before. It's not going to be bread because it was cooked bread, right? So if it does not look like bread, that's it. You say, but I'm in the mizonis. So let's read one more time just to make sure. That's what it says here. This only applies if the water of the second utensil did not become white because of the bread. But if the water did become white, as often happens when the bread is soaked in the hot water, it is as it is stated in paragraph 11 that the view of bread will not be considered to have appearance of the bread. So even though maybe it looks like bread, but because of the water, they say, okay, halachically it's not bread. Continue. If one puts bits of bread in a bowl and pours steaming water over them from the first utensil, the Achronim state that it is questionable whether the bits of bread are ruled as boiled or not. Okay, so let's read commentary, and it's actually exactly, you see, if you're paying attention to what we're saying, it's very, very similar of what we said about Shabbos kitchen, right? If you, as we said, if you pour from the first utensil, it's going to cook the contents of the food in a second utensil, right? So commentary is, this is because there is a dispute among the poskim as to whether or not steaming liquid poured from the first utensil without interruption is the stream will cook what it is poured onto. So basically without interruption, so this stream of the water that from the first utensil is connected, right? That's why it's saying without interruption. It is connected to the first utensil, and that's it. So it's capable of cooking. Consequently, if the bits of bread are not large as olive, so we're talking about when you pour it into the bowl from the first utensil, so they're not as large as olive. and have the appearance of bread, one should make the blessing of Hamotzi over other bread first, and thus discharge his obligation with respect to the blessing over these bits of bread as well. So now Mishneh Berurah is saying that we put ourselves in a questionable situation. Right? And why? Let's read one more time and we're going to explain. If one puts the bits of bread in a bowl and pour steaming water over them from first utensil, right? The Achranim state that it is questionable whether the bits of bread are ruled as a boil or not. So since there is a discussion, so some say it is bread, some say it is not bread because it will be poured from a second utensil. Right. Consequently, if the bits of bread are not large as olive, so if they're large as olive, right, that's larger than olive, that's one story. But if they're not as large as olive and have the appearance of bread, one should make hamotzi, right? So if they look like bread, even not as large as olive, still we say hamotzi. Over the bread first, over the other bread first. Just one second. So if they look like bread, but small pieces, right? So since it is under dispute of the authorities, so we have to make the blessing on some bread that's 100% bread. I think if possible, maybe it would be a better solution in all of these questionable situations, right? Just to make. Actually, I'm not sure if it's a good solution. Because if we have doubt, if maybe this rest of the bread that we eating, maybe it's not halakhic bread. So if you're going to make hamotzi on other bread, you have to eat kizais or even two kizais, just in case, right? To make sure that you cover everything. Okay, continue. So they say actually continue, but the same sentence. If the individual bits were boiled, so we just discussed it, then if they are as large as olive, one must make of them blessing hamotzi, right? A blessing after the meal. So commentary, Mishneh Berurah. If they are as large as olive, it is not necessary for all the bits to be large as olive. Interesting, right? Mishneh Berurah. But even if one of the bits is large as olive, one must make over it the blessing of hamotzi and the blessing for after meal. That's it. So blessing of hamotzi, blessing after meal. Consequently, he may eat the other small bits as well without further blessing. In a view of the blessing is made over the large bits. So basically, like it's always the case. You make the blessing on a big piece, as we said before, right? In the beginning of this simon, so you're on the biggest piece if you don't have whole bread, and all other pieces are covered. So it's very interesting Mishneh Berurah. So one more time the whole sentence, and we're going to get to the next Mishneh Berurah. If the individual bits were boiled, then if they are as large as olive, right? Large as olive, they must make the blessing hamotzi. Commentary, as large as olive. There is the actual bit of bread over which one makes the blessing was large as olive before it was boiled. So it's very interesting observation. So of course, after it absorbed all of the water, it would be bigger. No, before it was boiled, it must have the volume of olive. And it was not reduced below the size through the boiling. So basically, it was olive size, right? This 28 grams before we boiled, and now even we stopped it's cooked, but it's remained intact. So meaning it still have kazais. One cannot combine a bit of bread with one bit of bread that are stuck together. One cannot combine. So even if they're stuck together, but they were like right? So separate pieces. These are the bits that are stuck together. Okay, continue. and considered it as large as olive because of the bulk that they combine. Okay, so it has to be like a bulk, as we said, of olive before it was cooked. Nor can one take into account the fact that the bit of bread, which did not have the size of olive, expanded because of the liquid, and give it ruling as a bit that is larger than that is large and olive, merely because it's a present age, present size. So I mean, maybe before they cooked, it was smaller size. Now it's absorbed all of the water, it's swelled, and it looks 7 times bigger. So which is not true. Continue. I mean, the whole sentence. Let's read the whole sentence and next Mishneh Berurah. If the individual beets were boiled, then if they're as large as olive, one must make the blessing of Hamotzi and the blessing after the meal, even if they do not have the appearance of the bread. So, but because it was big piece, so we still Hamotzi and Birchas Hamazon. Commentary, Mishneh Berurah. For in a view of the fact that they are large as the olive, they will not have forfeit the classification of bread because of the boiling, even though they do not have the appearance of the bread. So because of the size before the boiling, so if they don't look like a bread now, does not make any difference. So size in this case makes all of the difference. So in other cases, it does not, right? As we said, if you like in a third scenario, we say even on crumbs, since they were not boiled, not stuck together, nothing. So you stay Hamotzi. Continue. However, if they are not as large as olive, then even though they seem to have appearance of the bread, one must make over them the blessing. One must not make over them the blessing of Hamotzi and after the meal. Okay, so let's try to understand. So now we're talking about the same case, the boiling pieces, and now they're not as large as olives, smaller pieces, and they still, even though they seem to have appearance of the bread. So commentary, Mishneh Berurah. For in a view of the fact that they are boiled, they are not considered to have appearance of the bread. That's it. So if the only exception, as we said, it's only if it's above kizayis. If one did not boil the bits of bread in a pot, but fried them in a liquid, in a pan, it is implied by Magid Avraham in subparagraph 36 that this does not have the same ruling as boiling. Okay. Therefore, if the bits have appearance of the bread, it is of avail for them to be classed as bread. As a ruling below, as a rule below, with respect to the second case discussed in the paragraph. I apologize. It's a lot of technical details, but that's. I mean, we're going to do just so I know if it's too much. You think it's much for you? We're going to do only this sieve and we stop. We're not going to go. Only this siman, and we stop. Okay. Very technical, but what can we do? We have to use our brain for something productive, basically. Okay, so it's so one more time what we are talking about. However, if they are not as large as olive, right? Then even though the appearance of the bread, so we don't say Hamotzi. Okay, but what Mishneh Berurah says, for in view of the fact that they are boiled, they are not considered to have appearance of the bread. That's clear. Okay.